It's a wonderful country we have. I like the song. Thank you all so much. We appreciate their attendance and their input. Beyond that, we all have a responsibility to our allies and trading partners, as we've said. They may have no choice but to turn to countries that don't share our values if they can't count on American support. Over the past 7 years, LNG production has ramped up, as I've said before, up to 14% of our current U.S. production capacity and more than any other exporting nation. To support these increased exports, we're producing more energy than ever in our country. 4.7 billion barrels of crude oil and 37 trillion cubic feet of gas in 2023. We have never hit those numbers before. And during that time, our domestic natural gas prices have remained flat on average. The average Henry Hub price was about $2.50 per MCF, and that's both in 2016 and 2023. But at the same time as we're producing and exporting more than ever, American consumers are using a record amount of gas. Now more than 32 trillion cubic feet annually is consumed in our country. So let me be clear, a lot has changed in a few years, and there are sensible reasons to update and market assessments that the DOE uses when reviewing export applications to ensure the trajectory that we're on won't risk harming American families and businesses. But these types of decisions should be firmly based on facts, not politics. Unfortunately, the administration hasn't actually done this new market assessment yet, as I understand, or presented us any facts that justify this pause at all. They do throw around some data points. For example, they tout that the U.S. is on track to export 26 billion cubic feet per day by the end of this decade, between facilities currently operating and those now under construction. But my question is this: where is the analysis showing that 26 is the magic number? And that's all we can do. It seems to me that 26 billion cubic feet per day is just what happened to be in the hopper when the White House made the political calculation to pause exports. The White House has gone out of its way to signal that the pause is a political ploy intended to get votes on the election year. It's all about politics, not economics, and we just saw yesterday what that does for us. Between the two statements issued by the White House announcing the pause, climate and environmental issues are mentioned more than 35 times. All combined, consumer cost, energy security, and helping our allies are mentioned less than half as much. In one egregious example that clearly politicizes the issue, the White House statement accuses MAGA Republicans of willfully denying the urgency of the climate crisis. This statement is just intended to antagonize, and it's not going to help us solve any of our actual problems. It shows a disregard for any efforts to build bipartisan support on a reasonable, sensible approach to protecting both consumers and the environment. Shockingly, in the White House statements, there is no reference at all to the crisis created by Putin's invasion of Ukraine, to the growing instability in the oil and gas producing regions in the Middle East following Hamas's attack on Israel, or to any other crisis that U.S. LNG exports can help address. Again and again, the White House has shown that it is so concerned with indulging radical climate activists that it's willing to play politics with our energy security and that of our allies. This reminds me all too well of the administration's misguided and unlawful pause on oil and gas leasing, which I know my fellow committee members will recall. Simply put, politicizing LNG exports is reckless and dangerous, and it could empower and enrich Russia, Qatar, and Iran. Deputy Secretary Turk, if I'm correct, DOE is just now beginning its new analysis of the economic impacts of our growing export levels. If this is the case, I strongly urge that this pause should be reversed immediately. Facts must become before action, not the other way around. Unfortunately, it seems that the White House has already sided with climate activists determined to block any and more LNG exports, and I'm deeply concerned the White House will put its thumb on the scale at the DOE to get the political outcome they want. And with actions like this that have direct impacts on our own economy and countries around the world, I am disappointed that this administration has attempted to avoid seeking the advice and consent of the Senate by changing the title of their climate envoy. I'm confident that today's hearing will paint a clear picture regarding the facts about the LNG market and motivations behind the pause. I'm grateful that Deputy Secretary Turk has joined us once again today to answer these serious questions. And Mr. Turk, I commend you for always, and I say that, always being willing to appear before this committee, even on contentious topics such as this. I'm also glad to have our second panel of experts from the energy sectors in both the U.S. and Europe to help us understand the facts about transatlantic LNG trade and the impacts on each of our respective economies. And with that, I'll turn to our ranking member, Senator Barrasso.
Well, thanks so very much, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the comments you made. I want to thank you for holding the hearing. I remember in 2014, then former Defense Secretary Robert Gates wrote about the then Vice President Joe Biden. He said he's been wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades. I'm sorry to say that Joe Biden's record not only hasn't improved, in fact, it's actually gotten worse. On every energy security issue facing our country, Joe Biden has been terribly wrong for our nation's security. As the Wall Street Journal put it, and this is from just the other day, Monday, February 5th, this is based on the President's announcement to stop approved liquefied natural gas LNG exports. He said, it is Biden's worst energy decision yet. That's the President of the United States. Even the liberal Washington Post called it, Biden's LNG pause is just political theater. You go through it and it says it's an election year sop to climate activists. Because that's what it is, Mr. Chairman, a transparent, very transparent election year payoff to appease radical environmentalists who want to end exports of American natural gas. The President wants to appear reasonable. He says, well, we just want to take a hard look at the impacts of LNG exports on energy costs. You made the point on that, on American energy security, and on the environment. It's environment, 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 but we already know the impacts. The impacts on our economy, the impacts on all of the issues related to this are overwhelmingly positive, including with the environment. We shouldn't spend any time, let alone a year that they want to spend, studying a question that has already been asked and answered. That's what makes President Biden's decision, in my opinion, cowardly. He defies logic to kiss up to the radical climate extremists. So why would I say this? Well, the New York Times reported, this is the New York Times reported, the White House made the decision to stop approving LNG exports based on the demands of a 25-year-old so-called influencer on TikTok. The President of the United States relying on some young man's TikTok account to set the policy affecting our closest allies around the world. So let's look at the facts. Critics have claimed that American natural gas exports would raise natural gas prices here at home. The data shows otherwise. In the 8 years since we began exporting LNG, the domestic spot price of gas is on average much lower than the domestic spot price on gas during the 8 years before we were able to start exporting LNG. Critics also say exports would reduce the supply of natural gas here at home. But in 2023, there's 23% more natural gas available to the U.S. economy than 2015, the year where we began with exports. That's because American natural gas exports stimulate additional natural gas production. American natural gas exports have also improved our balance of trade. From 2016 to 2023, LNG exports brought $134 billion into our American economy. In that process, they've created thousands of good-paying jobs for American workers. On security, the answer is obvious. American natural gas exports are vital to our nation's security. Without them, our allies and partners across the world would be more dependent on Russia's Vladimir Putin and on Iran's theocracy. Europe knows the value of American energy. 2 short years ago, our European allies faced a horrible decision of either depriving their own citizens of energy or buying gas from Russia. And of course, the money to Russia would help fund Putin's war against Ukraine. American natural gas exports allowed Europe to cut imports of Russian gas while keeping their citizens warm and the lights on. 2021, 29% of U.S. liquefied natural gas exports were shipped to Europe. Now more than twice that amount. Joe Biden has his way. Europe and other allies will now be on their own. They'll be forced back into the arms of Russia, Iran, the Middle East, anywhere but the United States. and Congress would be spending billions of dollars protecting Iran, Ukraine, and Israel, only for Joe Biden to allow Russia and Iran to generate billions more in the new natural gas sales. It is utterly ludicrous and self-defeating. But finally, there's no basis to the claim that American natural gas exports are bad for the environment. The fact is, American natural gas is among the cleanest in the world, far cleaner than Russia, far cleaner than Iranian gas, and at least 20 years climate conference, at last year's climate conference, nearly 200 countries, including the U.S., called out the role fuels like natural gas are playing in reducing emissions, not increasing emissions, but reducing emissions. Mr. Chairman, the world needs and wants more American energy, not less. The President can break his 50-year run of getting things wrong by waking up and reversing this terrible decision, one that the Washington Post says, just political theater, not really helping the economy or the environment. If he doesn't, Congress and this committee must act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Barrasso. We have two panels today. In our first panel, we have the Honorable David Turk, Deputy Secretary of Energy. And Mr. Turk, it's now your turn for your opening remarks.
Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be with you again today. The Natural Gas Act has given the Department of Energy the responsibility to evaluate whether authorizations for the export of liquefied natural gas, LNG, to non-free trade agreement countries is consistent with the quote-unquote public interest. Since 2018, when our last macroeconomic analysis was updated, there have been truly transformational changes that need to be fully incorporated into our analysis. While this analytical update is being completed, DOE will pause review of pending applications for additional export to non-FTA countries. Let me just start with some numbers. I think it's important to know where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, even under existing authorizations. In 2018, the last time we updated our macroeconomic analysis, U.S. LNG export capacity was less than 4 billion cubic feet per day. Today, our export capacity has more than tripled to 14 BCFD, making us the world's largest exporter of natural gas. By 2030, when another 12 BCF per day of U.S.-sourced LNG export capacity that is already authorized, already under construction, is set to come online, a total of 26 BCF per day of export capacity will be online from our country. In fact, a grand total of 48 BCF per day has already been authorized, which is nearly half of total current U.S. natural gas production. There is no doubt that this dramatically increasing amount of LNG export creates and will continue to create large numbers of jobs, but our public interest determinations also need to analyze potential price impacts to all U.S. consumers and all U.S. manufacturers and industry. EIA's 2023 long-term outlook, and this is EIA, our Energy Information Administration, an independent part of our department, found that as the U.S. exports more LNG, global and domestic prices converge, and that, and I quote, higher LNG exports create a tighter domestic natural gas market, all else held equal, increasing domestic natural gas prices. As a point of reference, in 2023, natural gas prices in Europe and Asia were 5 to 6 times higher than they were in the U.S. Our updated environmental analysis, of course, will need to focus on methane leakage, as methane has contributed over 30% of human-caused warming between 2010 and 2019. But we also need to better understand the downstream climate impacts of more and more volumes of U.S. LNG exports, especially over the long term. Our DOE authorizations run through 2050. As a point of reference, in the IEA's net zero scenario, global LNG demand needs to fall 75% by 2050. This is the scenario that gets us to the goal that science tells us we need to get to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. Our analytical update also needs to better capture any and all health risks to our frontline communities. Now, let me underscore, and I think this is incredibly important as we begin this hearing, what this review is not. It is not unprecedented. We've repeatedly updated our analysis about every 5 to 6 years at the department. And I want to say this very clearly, it will not impact our ability to supply our allies with LNG. U.S. LNG exports, as I've just gone over, have already tripled over the past 5 years, will double again by 2030, and could double yet again under existing authorizations. This review and pause does not impact any of these increased volumes. At the same time, Europe's natural gas demand is forecast to actually decline from 2021 to 2026 by 20%. LNG demand has already peaked in Japan and is expected to peak in South Korea by 2030. On the other hand, China's demand for LNG is expected to increase a further 65% by 2030. The Department of Energy is going into this take a step back review process as a data and science-driven organization with questions, not answers. Given all these transformational changes, DOE has the responsibility to assess additional proposed exports using the most complete, the most updated, and the most robust analysis possible. In fact, I would find it irresponsible if we weren't taking a step back and undertaking this rigorous analysis. Once updated, our analysis will be transparently shared for public comment. We very much appreciate in advance all stakeholders, all sides of this issue submitting their feedback. The U.S. Department of Energy remains committed to keeping energy affordable for all Americans, strengthening energy security for us and for our allies, and protecting against the impacts of climate change. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Now we'll turn to first question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Turk, so Russia, Iran, Qatar are ranked 1, 2, and 3 right now in the reserves of natural gas. Russia dramatically expanding its capacity to export LNG. Iran developing its own LNG export capacity. Qatar already the world's second largest LNG exporter. I think each would love nothing more than to displace American LNG on the world market. So I look at this and say, are America's interests better served if the world is buying LNG from the United States or from Russia?
So better served by LNG from the United States than these other countries.
And our interests better served if they're buying, if the world is buying it from the United States or Iran?
Better from the United States than Iran.
So Russia continues its brutal war in Ukraine. We're debating now on the floor of the United States Senate aid. Iran's proxies are waging a terrorist campaign against Israel. We're debating that aid as well. U.S. troops are working across the Middle East. Americans are not only sacrificing their money, but lives of their sons and daughters, as we just saw this past week, to support our friends and allies. You've served on the National Security Council. In times of war, is it wise to give our allies and partners and neutral parties across the world an excuse to do business with our enemies?
So we're, as I said, a data and science-driven organization. I think it's incredibly important to look at the numbers, look at what we've already tripled just over the last 5 to 6 years in terms of our export. We're set to double in the next few-year period of time with LNG facilities that are already under construction, and we've already authorized a doubling beyond that. You look at that huge growth, and then you compare that with what our allies need. Europe's demand, as I said, is actually decreasing. They're decreasing 20% to 2026. Japan has already peaked their natural gas need and their LNG need. So we need to look at how much we've already authorized, how much we're already in the process, and comparing that to what our allies actually need.
So let's take a look at this. You said look at the numbers. So for 6 decades, the U.S. has been a net importer of liquefied natural gas. Since 2016, the United States has been a net exporter. And we take a look at the revenue that has come in since 2016, $134 billion trade surplus in LNG 2016 through 2023. Would you agree that trade surpluses are good for American economy and the United States as a whole?
I think trade surpluses are great. What Congress has given us the responsibility is to take into account the entire public interest, the entire economic implications, including for our farmers, for our consumers, and for our own industry.
It does seem that this is a focus based on climate, and we've seen that the Washington Post, the LNG pause is political theater, Biden's worst energy decision ever. So in terms of, is the climate better served if the world buys, gas from the United States or from Russia?
So I feel incredibly proud to be part of an administration that's taking head-on the climate challenge that's facing our country, and we're making remarkable strides along those lines. I also think, in addition to the climate impacts of more and more exports of natural gas, we also need to take into account the economic consequences for American consumers, American farmers, and our American competitiveness. And it makes me very nervous when our independent data nerds come and tell us that prices are going to converge if we export more and more volume.
I want to get to the data nerds in a second, but your own boss, Secretary Granholm, has testified that Russian production of natural gas is the, quote, dirtiest on earth. Studies have shown that greenhouse gas emissions from Russian gas far exceed greenhouse gas emissions from the same amount of U.S. LNG. So I think the climate is better served if people around the world are using U.S. natural gas than Russia. But in your testimony, you argue that global natural gas demand is declining, and you cited two International Energy Agency forecasts. But I think you've ignored the forecast from your own department, the Department of Energy. Here we are, the EIA, Energy Information Administration. That's the green line. 2020, 2050, world demand for natural gas, according to your own Department of Energy. This is the chart, shows 4 leading energy models, all of which say that demand outside the U.S. is going to increase through 2050. Do you agree that natural gas demand outside the United States is going to continue to rise for the foreseeable future, as your own department is predicting?
So I think it incredibly important, as someone who's worked with modelers for many, many years, to look at a variety of models, question the assumptions going forward. I'm struck that if you look at where the International Energy Agency, and I served as the deputy to that organization and know some of the modelers who are working there, for the first time ever, their projections for overall demand across the world, including in the U.S., natural gas demand will peak this decade.
So you're disputing the Department of Energy. You're disputing your own departments.
No,
you said you go to different
other
models and look at a lot of them, and others don't agree. But this is your own department right now.
I think it's important to look at all of those scenarios and other scenarios. All of those scenarios are also reference case scenarios. Those scenarios are not on track for where we need to be for achieving our climate objectives.
Mr. Chair, my time is running out. I appreciate your comment. I'm just bringing out what the Department of Energy of the United States is saying the global needs are. But Mr. Chairman, I do have some letters from government officials, dozens of small business groups from here in the United States, all over the world, deeply concerned about President Biden's decision to stop approving LNG exports. And it's a big pile. I just ask unanimous consent to enter these letters into the record. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. What we have here is a situation to where is it going to be the United States abundance of natural resources that will be displacing a lot of the parts of the world that where the reserves lie now, and they're going to produce more. I was unaware that basically 15% of the gas being consumed in Europe is still coming from Russia. I was thinking that we were able to shut that down pretty significantly, and we have, but still 15%, and we can displace that. What I think we're sending is a real strong signal to other parts of the world that we might not be in the game. And I don't know if 26 is the right number. I don't know if it's 30, 40, or wherever we stand. I know our capacity is. I know what the reserves are and the shale reserves, that we have the ability to produce it better than any place else in the world. I think us producing the amount of oil that we're producing has kept the world markets a little bit more in check than it would have been. The price of gasoline would have been out of sight right now with what's been taken off the market and displaced. So I don't know, has there ever been a pause on natural gas before? Has there ever been a pause on LNG? You all have gone through the reviews 2018, you said. You didn't pause then. You saw us going right through the stratosphere, and nobody said, whoa, wait a minute, we better look at this. And now we're at 13, maybe 14 right now, and we know what's in the hopper is up to 26, and we don't know what's basically in the queue. So if you take everything into the queue and what's in the hopper right now, maybe you're at 35, I think, in that neighborhood. I'm not sure if that's the right number or not. The only thing we're saying, Mr. Turk, is rather than saying and sending a signal, do the evaluation, come back and show us that how it would be restrictive on our markets, how it would be harmful to our consumers and citizens, we don't see that, because the more we've produced, the more we're able to put into the market. And with doing that, we're basically stabilizing the price in America. Now, if you're telling me that we're going to run out and the shale doesn't have the reserves, and we're just about at the end, we've done hit the Utica, I mean, the Marcellus, we got the Utica, you got the Permian, you got all the things that producing all this resource for us. Those are gone. They're not. I've seen the reserves. And I think you have too. So that's not fair to the American consumer, what we're going to be doing to them voluntarily. And that's what we're saying. This pause should be basically eliminated now, not sending that signal. Finish your, and then come back. That's all. We put the cart before the horse. So the areas that have the reserves that basically can take up what the United States would be either drawn back or cut back, well, we know Russia has reserves, correct? We know Iran has reserves. We know basically Qatar. Those three countries are not our same values. That resources, the money that comes from those reserves, are going to be used for the most destructive in the United States and to the world. It'll be used for destructive purposes, proliferating and supporting terrorist supports, basically uncalled for wars on Ukraine and other parts of our European allies. This is what we're worried about. This energy that we have, the abundance, can really stabilize and help our allies get through and basically not turn to these resources. We've turned a blind eye to the ghost ships of oil coming from Iran because we wanted to make sure the markets, we weren't going crazy. We let Venezuela, the dirtiest production of oil in the world, come back. We got biomass being used in Africa and all the growing nations of the world that we could replace with clean natural gas. We're not going to be able to fulfill that. I just think it's a terrible, terrible mistake. Again, I said, I want to see the facts. So what we're here for, and I would say to you, is that an American European partners are looking at us, and if they see us putting that pause button right now, and they're going to say, well, can we really count on them? Our future growth here. I noticed you had said that the growth in Europe might not be there, but you do acknowledge where the growth in the rest of the world's coming from, where the dirtiest consumption of energy today or no consumption, and they're looking for whatever. They'll burn anything they have in their backyard. They'll burn anything they have, the cheapest supply of any type of energy they'll use. And the last account I knew, it was called global climate. It's not called U.S. climate. It's not called any other climate in any other nation, except it's global. We're all responsible. We've done a pretty good job, and we can do a lot better. And the more that we're producing, the better we're helping the climate. So I would say, if you would take back, I notice my statement's not much of a question right now. I have more questions. I'll get to them my second round. But if you would take the consideration of removing this pause, it sends a horrible signal. And if we could sit down with the climate policy makers in the White House and the DOE and look at something strategically that would make sense. But sending this signal serves, I think, a wrong direction for our country, a very wrong direction. With that, I'm going to turn now to, since we got out of order there, I'll go to Senator Cortez Masto for her questions.
Deputy Secretary, thank you for being here. I think the challenge for me, and this is what I hope you to please address. So we have been fighting in this committee to take back our economic advantage around the world in mining and manufacturing, right? And this is one area where we do have an economic advantage, and there's a concern by, as you hear, why would we see that economic advantage? At the same time, however, I'm just seeing a chart showing record profits for LNG, but I don't see the benefits coming into Americans in my community. And so there is a question about what is happening, right, at the end of the day. So that's kind of where I'm approaching this, to understand the administration's position. But my first question to you is, why the pause? And does the pause truly have an impact on some of the projects moving forward and our access to that LNG that we want here and domestically, or as we look to export it?
Well, thanks, Senator. And this is the public interest. That's what Congress has given us the responsibility to take care of. And I think you're rightfully focused, we're rightfully focused from the department on the economic impact for all Americans. We have a phenomenal competitive advantage in all sorts of ways in our country. One is the fact that we pay 5 to 6 times less for natural gas right now These are consumers, this is farmers, natural gas goes into fertilizer, this is our manufacturers and industry. It makes me nervous when you've got independent agencies like the EIA saying that prices will converge as we export more and more volumes. We need to take a hard look at that and understand the full implications of this for Americans before we export even more and more volumes. To your question on the pause, when we have already authorized and constructed, we're already in the process of constructing another doubling from where we are right now. We're the world's largest natural gas LNG exporter right now, 14 BCF per day. Already under construction takes us to 26. Already authorized could take us up to 48, half of our total gas production. When I see that, I say, take a step back. Let's make sure we're doing the analysis. Let's make sure before we authorize anything more to 2050, we've got to do the analysis on the economic implications, the climate implications, all of that to make sure we inform that public interest determination. So that's why we're doing a pause right now.
But does the pause actually impact projects in the queue?
So the pause does not impact what's already being exported. It does not impact those projects that are already being constructed. That's 14 to 26, another doubling. And it doesn't even impact all of those additional authorizations to 48 BCF per day that we've already made.
So the pause is on any potential future request to expand LNG?
Future
Is that right?
requests, pending requests, but everything that's already been authorized is already in the queue. It's not impacted by this pause.
And to what extent is your study going to be looking at how we address the climate crisis piece of that and lowering methane gas
So
releases?
we absolutely need to focus on that, and I think it's incredibly important not only to focus on the climate impact over the next few years of additional exports of our gas. We need to focus on where we want to be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now. I'm incredibly proud to be part of an administration where we have a net zero goal by 2050. Countries around the world are setting net zero goals. As I mentioned, a scenario consistent with achieving our net zero goals says we need 75% less liquefied natural gas, LNG, exports around the world by 2050. So those are stark numbers, and we've got to take that very much into account in the public interest, absolutely.
And how long do you think this study and this pause will last?
We're going to do this as quickly as we possibly can do it. We're going to do it right, though, and we're going to do it in a very rigorous manner, given that these trends are going on. The way we do this is we ask our national labs. Our national labs, as you know, Senator, certainly the chairman knows, other members of this committee know, have phenomenal expertise. We're going to ask several of our national labs to take a look at the economic analysis, the climate analysis, the national security analysis. And then very importantly, we'll do this transparently. We'll put this updated analysis out there for public comment, at least 60 days that everyone, all stakeholders can comment on it. We can improve the analysis, and then we can be much more confident that we're making these public interest determinations with this most rigorous, most complete, most updated analysis possible. So we'll move as quickly as possible, but I can't set a particular timeline on it. I don't think that would be fair to the process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And now we have Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Turk, for being here. I have to tell you, this whole place that we are in right now just is almost incomprehensible to understand why, in an effort to review something, you are absolutely putting a pause, put a freeze on it, call whatever it is, but basically you're stopping things. I noticed that my friend and a former chair of this committee, Senator Landrieu, is with us, and it's actually interesting because I was provided a statement that she made apparently very recently about the decision coming out of the administration, and she says, "This is surprising, it's disappointing, and it's alarming. It's completely contrary to the president's own climate goals. When you stop exporting cleaner natural gas from the United States, you only encourage countries all over the world to use more coal, which is twice as dirty and has twice as much harmful emissions. He's breaking his promise to our Democratic allies at a time when he's asking Republicans in Congress to support money to the Ukraine. He's pulling the rug out from under the frame. It doesn't make any sense." Well, Mary, know that I agree. I think it makes no sense. So you've just responded to Senator Cortez Masto that you're going to have this very transparent process. People are going to be able to have comment. It was kind of stunning. You have to admit that it was kind of stunning that there was no public process leading up to this, There was no Federal Register notice. Just all of a sudden, one Friday, it's always on a Friday, Friday afternoon, January 26th, we hear that there is this pause. A pause in further LNG exports to non-FTA so that you can do this review. I'm trying to understand whether there's actually a strategy in defining the scope of the review, whether or not there was any direction provided for an operating timeline, because it's not just Senator Barrasso, it's not the New York Times. You have to acknowledge that there's a fair amount of skepticism and cynicism about this and the politics of the timing, with a president who is trying to get well with the environmental community because he may have done something right from an energy security perspective in approving a project like the Willow Project up north. He did the right thing there. The administration did the right thing there. But now, blame it on TikTok or blame it on whatever, but we're in a place that just doesn't seem to make sense. And it doesn't make sense from an economic perspective, from a trade perspective. But I want to follow on Senator Manchin, talking about the national security implications. Because right now the world is crazy out there, and we know this all too well. We need to be able to send a message to our friends and allies that you can actually trust the United States to be true to their word, that we're more than just talk, but that we'll actually be there with some substance. And we can send money, or we can send natural gas, LNG. We can help our friends and allies, and that's where we have made an extraordinary difference. So, a couple questions here before I run out of time. First of all, Undersecretary Crabtree, he was at a conference in Italy last week. He stated that this review will be made in a few months' time, that analysis will be available for public comment, not just limited to public comment in the U.S. Our allies, both in the government and industry around the world, can feel free to comment. It will be a robust analysis. Do you agree with Undersecretary Crabtree that this is going to be done in a few months?
So again, I'm not going to put a specific timeline on it, but we're going to do it as expeditiously
Do you
as possible.
think that he's being realistic with that statement then?
I think when you see the kinds of our independent energy data nerds, EIA, telling us, take a look at the convergence, the potential convergence in price, the fact that we right now have such an advantage, we pay 5 to 6 times less. What does that mean as we export more and more natural gas? There are a lot of questions here, Senator. I completely agree with
There's a lot
your
of
point.
questions, but
And that's what we need to answer. That's why we're doing this kind of analysis and review.
we were surprised when we saw this on Friday afternoon of the 26th. Were our allies equally surprised? Were they given a heads up or any indication as to this action? We have allies, Germany, Japan. They currently have offtake agreements with the CP2 export facility. That's impacted by this review. Was there any forewarning to them? They've got considerable investments with regards to these projects. We're going to hear from Eurogas on the next panel, but it really begs the question, how does the administration respond to the statements that this policy change will cause significant concern regarding the price volatility, the economic turmoils, the barriers to decarbonization, and more that can arise in Europe as a result of the pause? And so it's not just us, but does the department consider the security of our allies as a component to national security, and whether or not these were factored in before this surprise announcement? I mean, this is impact to our economy, this is impact to our trade, and this is impact to our national security. And what we have now is you're going to have a robust process. It's indefinite in time, my guess, and I think it's probably a pretty well-educated guess, that it will conveniently not be concluded prior to the election. It's stunning to me that in an effort to, again, try to get well with the environmental community, you would put so many security components at risk. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm happy to answer that if there's time.
Sure, go
on the
ahead.
national security piece, and certainly, Senator, happy to have more conversations. When Senator Chairman Manchin called me, I was at the airport flying home on a trip, and the chairman said, "We want to have you come up as quickly as possible in order to." I think the way you put it, Senator, was take the temperature down. Let's get good facts on the table. Let's actually talk about what we're doing with this pause and review. That's why I'm here, happy to answer any and all questions. I've really appreciated all our conversations over many, many years, Senator, and anything that I can do, anything that we can do to talk this through.
We don't want to kill the messenger here, but you are the one who is
You are the.
who is in the hot seat right now.
I will say on the national security side, maybe two points. One, I think it's incredibly useful, again, to go back to the numbers, to go back to the fact that we've already tripled our natural gas exports from our country. We're on target with LNG facilities already under construction, which won't be impacted by this pause at all, to double, again, roughly to 26 BCF per day. And we've got authorizations above and beyond that. So our volume of natural gas exports is increasing at the same time Europe's demand is actually decreasing. And so I feel very comfortable that we are taking care of our European allies, our other allies like Korea, like Asia. And I think it's incredibly important to listen to the governments themselves. I know we've got a representative from the European Industry Association for Natural Gas. That is a perspective, but I think it's more important to listen to what the Europeans are actually saying. The European Commission has said publicly this pause will not have any short or medium-term impact on EU's security of supply. So again, I think it's important to listen to everyone.
Let me add, if I may chime in real quick, and I'm going to go right to Senator Hickenlooper. You have 22 more in the queue. So if you have 26 right now, everything that's basically under construction with the 14, we'll go up to 26.
That's
You're
right.
saying we could go to 48.
That's the total number authorized
I think
at
you
this
have to
point.
be accurate on that, Mr. Turk, that 22's been in the queue for quite a while. It only moves when the market moves. If we could have sent a signal and said, listen, the United States is prepared to replace and displace all the dirty fuel coming from countries that are basically supporting terrorist operations. That's all we have to say. That's all you had to say. But by doing the pause, it's like we're going to harm the industry here, and we really don't care what happens in the rest of the world. And the rest of the world's counting on us. 48 might be the magic number. I don't know. But 22 have not. They've been in the queue for a long time. They might never be built until the market grabs them and says, we got to have more. And we're going to say, go do it. We're going to help our friends. That's it in a nutshell where I'm coming from.
Hey, Senator, if I could just, on
Sure.
that, I think the numbers are important. You're absolutely right. The 26 is what's
Yeah.
under construction.
Right.
That is what is in the queue, in plans to come online.
And that
within the next-
22 might never come. Maybe
That 22
yeah.
may or may not,
Right.
obviously, different investment decisions.
Sure.
Taking a look at that. It's also clear, and I haven't shared this number yet, we have pending, above and beyond that 48 BCF, already authorized another 11.2. That is a significant additional amount of volume. That is what is being paused now during the consideration.
I'm just saying that's the market pauses it without you putting a political statement out that you're pausing it. The market paused the 22. Definitely the market's really paused the other 11 because there's not a consumption for it. Okay? But we have the ability to produce that much. We have the shale revolution that nothing else has ever been seen. That's all I'm saying. I think just what we're talking about, calm it down. Let's get out of the politics. Let's get to the facts and let the market do what the market's going to do. But let the world know we can help you. Don't turn to Russia. Don't go to Iran, okay? And Qatar's playing games with whoever they can. We don't need to have them going there. And Qatar with Iran right now, that big gas field they have there, they haven't even tapped into that. We're really concerned about that. There's a lot of concerns we have that's going to be harmful to the world and definitely to the United States. Senator Hickenlooper, I'm sorry, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Turk, for being here today, but also for all your work on this. And I, as you know, I'm deeply concerned about climate change. I've studied it since I was a graduate student in Earth and Environmental Science back in 1970s. And the thing that I found so perplexing is that we don't have a business plan, a coherent, integrated business plan on how we're going to address climate change. And I don't think we're going to do well establishing energy policy on a project-by-project basis. So maybe you can elaborate on the Department of Energy's perspective on the role of natural gas in the long-term strategy, both domestically and internationally.
First of all, Senator, thank you for your leadership as someone who's also focused on climate change and clean energy issues for the vast bulk of my career. Thank you for all that you've done when you were governor and as a senator as well, including focusing on methane emissions.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
I don't know if as many people here appreciate how much you've done in the methane emission cause and the leadership on that in particular. I think your point is exactly why we are taking this pause, taking this step back, updating our analysis. Congress has given us the responsibility to look in the public interest project by project, application by application, and the volumes of what we've already authorized to export that we're already constructing are so large. The climate implications, especially as we look out not only the next few years but decades, these are huge facilities that last for decades. That is why we need to take a step back. That is why we need to update our analysis with the rigor it deserves so that we can make those project by project determinations, but in a broader context, in a rigorous context, in an updated context.
All right, well, I look forward to seeing that because I think it is crucially important to get that plan, and the larger scale and more integrated the plan can be, the better. You mentioned methane, which I remember when we first started talking with the industry in Colorado about measuring methane and then regulating methane. You know, in business, the cliche is that what gets measured is what gets managed, or what gets done, as sometimes is said. I think that's true in science as well, and certainly in the science of energy. Regarding the climate impact of LNG exports, there's a lot of issues around the energy and emissions that the future LNG is going to displace. How does DOE plan to integrate the uncertainties of these emission measurements into its climate analysis for future LNG projects? And what is the current understanding of the emissions intensity of U.S. LNG compared to other nations? In other words, how are you all working to enhance understanding of emissions throughout the entire supply chain? I mean, obviously, a lot of this has to do with how much methane escapes during discovery, production, and transportation, liquefaction, and then transportation as liquid. How well can we measure that as well?
Yeah, so our measurements are getting better and better, but we need to keep working on that. We've got satellite technology. We're actually funding some companies to look at it basin-wide using lasers and other techniques to make sure that we've got the best numbers on it. Methane, as you know, first and foremost, is a big deal. It's a huge challenge. And we've got to make near-term progress on methane if we're going to be successful in our overall climate change strategy. In fact, it's been estimated that if we want to achieve the goals we've set out for ourselves, we need to reduce methane emissions around the world, not just from oil and gas, but from agriculture across the board, 1/3 by 2030. So we've got a lot of work to do. I'm incredibly proud that EPA has stepped up, building off of terrific work that's been done in Colorado and elsewhere, and actually setting standards. We should have standards here. There's no reason that we should have leaking methane coming out throughout the life cycle perspective. I've worked with a lot of modelers and analysts. I think it's incredibly important as we undertake an analysis, as we update our analysis in this rigorous way. We bring in a variety of voices. We bring in several of our national labs to come at this from different perspectives, different assumptions. There's never one right answer about what's going to happen 5, 10 years, 15 years from now. We need to have different viewpoints coming in. That's why the public comment period, I think, is so important as well. We'll put our analysis, we'll do our homework, we'll put it out there for NGOs to take a look at, for oil and gas companies to take a look at, everyone to take a look at, so we have the best, as you said, a comprehensive framework to make these decisions.
Right, I do appreciate it. I appreciate some of the grants from the Inflation Reduction Act that are going out to these large-scale projects to really measure methane, and so that we can actually have more confidence on it. I also do appreciate you're looking at it from multiple different perspectives. When I was as a geology student, we used to call it the theory of multiple working hypotheses, where you don't assume that one approach is the solitary correct way to do it, but you try to look at several possible perspectives and figure out which one is exactly the best. So that scientific approach is much appreciated.
Well, and just a data point, if I could, Senator, on that. There's a scenario that's been done by the International Energy Agency called their announced policy scenario. It's a scenario that takes everyone at their word for all the net zero commitments that have been made, and what does that mean in terms of overall fuel supplies, emissions, et cetera. Under that announced pledges scenario, global demand for natural gas, this isn't just LNG, this is all of natural gas, would decrease 4% by 2030 and 37% by 2050. So again, we need to have multiple analysis coming at and exploring these issues.
Right, and it's so dynamic. I appreciate that and how difficult that is when you look at those expectations. We're not going to make all of them, and which ones we make, which ones we don't, and how we have to adjust our future. It's all interdependent.
And that announced policy scenario is not even the scenario we need to be on if we're actually going to achieve our objectives.
Exactly. Okay, I'm out of time, but
No,
I
no.
might come back. I might come back.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Okay, let me just say this. Let's go to 6 minutes. Forget 5. Go at least 6, okay? Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, to no one's surprise, we're here again talking about the Biden administration just causing a train wreck for domestic energy policy. And the U.S. exports more LNG than any other country in the world, as we're well aware, which is a critical way of aiding our allies against Putin's aggressions and combating the Iran-backed forces. And however, this news pause on pending and future approvals, this aid could end. I mean, it's like, you're welcome, Russia. Deputy Secretary, back in July of 2023, the Department of Energy denied a petition from a highly recognized environmental group regarding rulemaking for LNG export regulations. According to the department, one of the reasons for the denial was that DOE already has rigorous standards for approving gas exports. That was just 6 months ago. Now, in the first year of the new year, DOE has done a complete 180 and paused LNG exporting permits to perform a blanket review of its LNG policy for climate change. So why shouldn't we believe that the sudden change in tune from rigorous standards to a blanket review of LNG export regulations is a result of any strategic political play from the Biden administration?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Senator. And I think it's incredibly important to appreciate what this pause is and what this pause isn't. We've already tripled our LNG exports just over the last 5 years. We already have pending construction that doubles that to 26 BCF per day. And we've already authorized, none of the pause touches any of this, authorized up to 48 BCF per day, almost half of our overall production in the U.S. right now. Those are the kinds of numbers, as we've had conversations with the Europeans, with the Japanese, with the South Koreans, increases their comfort level that those volumes are going to be there at the same time that Europe's demand is going down 20%. Japan has already peaked their natural gas and their LNG use. They're going down, including because they're bringing more nuclear capacity back online. Korea's is going to peak by 2030. One country who's not peaked, in fact, will increase their LNG appetite is China. China's LNG appetite is expected to increase 65% to 2030. So these kinds of numbers give me great confidence that we are taking care of our allies. Again, when you look at the actual numbers, you listen to the governments themselves. Of course, industry associations would want even more gas and would want to have even more exports coming from the U.S. And we're just asking questions with this pause. We're asking questions with this analysis to make sure that our experts at the national labs are coming at this in a very rigorous way to inform those decisions once the pause is lifted.
So how does this pause coincide with the Administrative Procedure Act?
So Congress has given us the authority and I would say the responsibility to make public interest determinations. We take that incredibly seriously. When we've seen these kinds of volumes, these kinds of trends, we think it in the public interest to take a step back, to do the rigorous analysis, and make sure we're doing our homework so that we can be true to that responsibility. So I feel very comfortable. I've had many conversations with our general counsel and our legal team. We feel very comfortable of our legal position here, and frankly, I think it'd be irresponsible if we weren't taking a step back and doing this kind of rigorous analysis.
Does this deprive the interested parties the ability to challenge the rule before it goes into effect?
So happy to have our general counsel talk to you or others on the particulars of that. Obviously, we get sued all the time for doing all sorts of things. It's a free country. People can, I'm always eager to hear a variety of viewpoints on this issue. We'll have the public comment period. There's a reason we're doing that, to have this be transparent, to make sure that our analysis is not only informed by our experts in our national labs, but informed by industry experts, by NGO experts across the board.
The industries that are contacting me have a very different opinion of that, but I want to turn to the trend that is happening across the board with our federal agencies. In 2022, FERC issued policy statements citing climate change to consider and approve future natural gas products. This was met by so much blowback that FERC withdrew the proposal. And just last year, EPA used the same strategy in its power plant rulemaking. And the electricity generation industry continues to remain in a state of uncertainty on how they are going to meet these standards, knowing that it will only worsen supply chains, ultimately harming them further. DOE continues to follow the same doomed track without listening to industry needs. And uncertainty just seems to be the name of the game when it comes to the Biden domestic energy policy. What impact will this pause have on the outlook for financing and carrying out future LNG production, not to mention the uncertainty it creates for our allies that increasingly rely on American LNG?
So let me again reiterate, this pause does not impact those projects already under construction and those projects that have already been authorized, up to a half of our total natural gas production in our country. Secondly, I think it's incredibly important to listen to industry perspectives. I meet with industry folks all the time. I meet with NGO folks all the time. But I think it's important to also appreciate that they have a particular perspective. They have a particular interest in these matters. What Congress has given us the responsibility is to look at the public interest, especially how this impacts U.S. consumers, U.S. farmers, U.S. manufacturers, and our competitive advantage right now. You also mentioned the FERC. I think it's important to point out that the FERC said in 2022, continued growth in net exports, including from LNG export facilities, will place additional pressure on natural gas prices here in our country. So it's important to look at everything everybody's saying.
Thank you, Senator.
My time is up.
Well, we're not really paying a whole lot of attention to times anymore, it seems like, but no problem about that. I know, I'm the worst, that's why I'm not reprimanding anybody. But I do want to make I want to make one correction. I think it'd be for the whole staff or our whole committee to know, and staff and everyone here, that basically the reduction as far as in gas consumption in Europe, especially over in Europe, has gone down because of the Ukraine war, the high prices that they had to endure and deindustrialization that they've gone through. That will come back. You're saying that they're not going to come back. I think that would be part of the evaluation, sir, but I don't think it's accurate saying that you're expecting their demand to be low. If they have stable pricing that they can count on and rely on, not Russia, not foreign adversaries that we can't count on, then you will see Europe come back, I believe, strong. And that's what they're waiting for. That's my statement. And we'll go to Mr. Padilla at this time.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. I too believe they're going to come back, but when they come back and when they rebuild their infrastructure and economy, it will be in a much more efficient infrastructure and economy than infrastructure of decades past, and that needs to be part of the consideration as well. Mr. Chair, thank you for being here and always being accessible to me and to my office. I appreciate the prior questions on U.S. energy leadership and its impact on our allies, our ability to help our allies and meet our obligations, and even more appreciate your responses to those questions. I think a couple of things I just want to add for the record, a couple of data points. The United States is the global leader of LNG exports today, with 14 billion cubic feet per day in current operating capacity and I think even more important to underscore here, 48 billion cubic feet per day in total authorizations already approved by the Department of Energy. So that's over 3 times our current operating capacity. So we're putting the pause in that perspective of what's already been approved above and beyond what's already operating. They beat me to the punch in asking not just the broad questions of fulfilling commitments to our allies, but again, appreciate the specificity with which you addressed the questions about Europe, the questions about Japan, the questions about Ukraine, South Korea, and others. Just to round that out, though, would you spend another minute addressing this? Given the already authorized tripling of our LNG export output, how will the projected LNG exports compare to global demand through 2050?
Yeah, thanks for the question. You put it incredibly well. You should be testifying here, Senator, anytime you want to work at the Department of Energy. So again, you look at different scenarios, right, to look at where the global demand is going to be. And important to look at reference case scenarios. That is basically a prediction of where experts think things are going. But then also look at where we need to go, given where climate change tells us we need to be in terms of reducing our use on unabated fossil fuels, including natural gas. So a couple numbers for you that I think are useful here. EIA, again, that's the independent data arm of the Department of Energy's reference case. For U.S. LNG exports in 2050, expects exports to be at 27.3 BCF per day, which again is right around the 26 BCF per day that we are already under construction. So I think that's a relevant data point to explore on that front. S&P Global, if you want to look at an industry source, overall LNG supply growth from around the world could outpace demand growth over the next 5 years. A lot of people are talking about a potential glut in the market because of so much being constructed and demand numbers in Europe and elsewhere decreasing along those lines. The senator makes an incredibly important point on Europe in particular, Senator, if I could pick that up for a second. Europe had a traumatic experience when the gas was shut off by pipeline from Russia. I feel incredibly proud that we were able and we were in an opportunity to provide that gas to work with them on efficiency and other kind of improvements going forward. It's, of course, up to the Europeans to decide for themselves what mix of gas, what mix of other fuels go forward. They are making strides, and they have incredibly impressive goal to reduce their overall emissions quite quickly to 2030 and to 2035. Et cetera, along those lines. Senator, just to round out the question, if you look at actual climate scenarios in terms of what's necessary, if we're going to be on the right path to get to where science tells us we need to get to, again, the IEA, International Energy Agency scenario says we need 75% less LNG by 2050 if we're actually going to be on the pathway we need to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. So maybe too many numbers, but I know you're a numbers guy, so throw them out there for you.
No, absolutely. And again, a reminder to my colleagues on the committee and staff and everybody who's concerned here, we track volume, supply, demand, but must keep into consideration conservation and efficiencies and that impact on demand while we continue to grow our economy. And meet the needs of a growing population. I also want to course correct a little bit some of the comments that were made by some of my colleagues earlier. And I got to say how embarrassing and insulting it is to suggest that this is an administration that is making decisions based on TikTok influencers. I mean, it's the prior administration that denied science and prided itself in deleting data and research that is important and is conducted by professionals in a number of federal departments and agencies. This administration, and I know the Department of Energy, among others, works hard to ensure that decisions are made based in science and fact, and that we're holding ourselves to that important standard. And I hope the committee just sort of continues to come back to that. And in that spirit, Mr. Turk, how will the Department of Energy leverage the national labs as resources in the effort to better understand the climate impacts of LNG exports. I mean, you made broad reference to it earlier, but can you spend some time elaborating on that?
Yeah, happy to do so. And just for the record, I don't have a TikTok account, so I'm not sure what all the TikTok
Neither do I, right?
discussion is all about. I got to be perfectly honest with you. So our national labs, and you know this, Senator, you've got a couple of our national labs actually 3 national labs in your state. Phenomenal resource, phenomenal talent, phenomenal expertise, independent expertise. These are government-owned labs, but contractor-operated labs, which gives them an extra scientific integrity to them. That's who we turn to when we do analysis like this. And some of the best analysts, economic analysts, life cycle analysts in the world are in our national labs. And so we are working with them. We've been working with them. We said, take a step back. Let's look at this. Let's look at the models that you have. Let's use other tools to make sure we're incorporating and looking at the economic consequences, national security consequences, environmental and climate change consequences. One thing we're asking for additional information on is the health impacts for frontline communities as well. That is an important consideration. All of this goes into our public interest determination. That is what Congress has given us when we do these case-by-case application reviews and analysis. And again, this will all be put out publicly for public comment. Everyone can comment on it. If you like this part of the analysis, don't like this part of an analysis, and then we'll finalize and we'll use that so we actually have the most complete analysis and analytical framework possible.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, my time is up.
Sorry.
Thank
You stay right on time. Thank you. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I think you captured this hearing very well. The phrase you used was, "I just want to see the facts." And I think, Mr. Turk, isn't that exactly what we're talking about here, is determining the facts? And your legal responsibility is to see that export projects are in the public interest, not in the interest of the oil and gas industry, not in the interest of anybody else, but in the public interest. And that's your job. And isn't what you're doing here is simply looking before we leap? You're saying we want take some time and look at the analysis, both in terms of the climate, but also the economics. Isn't that what this is all about?
Yeah, 100% accurate. And Congress has given us that responsibility, the public interest determination. And I know the Secretary, myself, all of us who are fortunate enough to serve in these roles take that incredibly, incredibly seriously. And we're an organization of data and an organization of science, including and especially our national labs.
All we're trying to do is determine, A, what the environmental impacts might be, including methane, so you're looking at a life cycle, and also, and that's an unsettled question, and then also at the economic impacts of going beyond where we already are. I have to tell you, I was sitting right here in 2015, January, when we had a hearing with the natural gas industry, and we were talking about exports, and I expressed concern about if we export too much, it'll affect our domestic prices. The witness for the industry said it'll never go beyond 9% of production. Today, and I said, how about taking a friendly amendment, putting that in writing? Today, we're at 14%. In 2028, we're going to be at 26%, and as you've testified, by 2050, close to 50%. I'm just a country lawyer from Maine, but I don't understand how you will take 50% of the production of a commodity and that won't affect the price. And we don't have to speculate too much about this. We can look at Australia. Australia price has gone from $3.45 a gigajoule in 2015, in Australian dollars, to $17.93 because of the gigantic increase in exports of liquefied natural gas from Australia. So that should be a warning to us. And I don't know the conclusion of this, but my understanding is all you're trying to do is be sure before we add additional commitments that we know what the effect will be on a manufacturer in Michigan or a family in New England trying to heat their house. Isn't that all this is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're talking about those percentages and those volumes, that should be a blinking red light for all of us to take a step back. Let's do the analysis. Let's focus on what the impacts are for farmers, for consumers, for industry. Again, we pay 5 to 6 times less than those in Europe and Asia right now.
Which is a huge economic advantage.
That is a huge economic advantage. Do we want to give that up as a country? Again, we need to analyze that. We're not answering questions here. We're raising the issues so that we can do the analysis that allows us to make those sound decisions.
Well,
going
again,
forward.
to understand just exactly what's being proposed, as I think you've said, no projects that are under construction or have already been permitted are affected by this.
That's right, including the jobs of those projects. Those jobs are not at stake here. Those projects continue.
And they take us, just those projects that are already approved, take us to between 26 and 30% of production. Is that
That's right.
correct? So we're not stopping any construction. We're not stopping any projects. We're just saying for future projects that have been proposed but not approved, we're going to see what the impacts are going to be.
That's exactly right. And look before you leap, do the analysis now. Again, these are long-term decisions. When we make an authorization, it goes out for several decades period of time. Before we do that, make sure we take into account the full implications, economic, climate, national security.
And we're getting a lot of representations from various parties about what's going to happen and not happen, whether it'll affect prices, what the methane impacts. I go back to one of my philosopher guides, Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. And that's really all we're talking about here is verifying. Is that correct?
Trust but verify, and also look at who is making what points, right? It's not a surprise that folks, and I'm not disparaging folks, who are in the natural gas business, whether in Europe or in the U.S., they have a certain perspective. But that is not the public interest. We need to take into account the full implications, impacts for all Americans.
Including the benefits to
Including the
industry.
benefits of those jobs, absolutely.
Now, I think you testified that its projections are, and these aren't your projections, but IEA projections are, European demand will flatten, if not decline. Didn't you testify at the very beginning that where the real increase is going to be in China?
65% projected increase between now and 2030 in China for LNG demand.
And isn't it true that Chinese companies are financing some of these proposed projects, or the contracts are based behind these
Absolutely.
projects? So what we're really talking about here is potentially exporting our economic advantage to China, where they're paying much higher energy costs. It's one of the few advantages we have vis-a-vis China.
That's why I say it's irresponsible if we didn't take a step back, do the analysis, and make sure, eyes wide open, we know what we're getting into.
But I'm also aware that a strong argument could be made that if we're replacing coal plants in China with natural gas, that's a net benefit to the climate. However, we've also got to understand what the life cycle net emissions are in terms of methane, liquefaction, unliquefaction, transportation across the ocean. So we're looking at apples to apples in terms of emissions. I've always been supportive of natural gas as a cleaner fuel, but only if methane is controlled, because if it isn't, as you know, methane is I've seen ranging between 30 and 80 times as serious a greenhouse gas as CO2. So we just want the facts. Isn't that correct?
So we do, and right now, China has 1,109 gigawatts of coal online. They also have plans to bring on an additional 392 gigawatts of coal. And so we need to be taking into account what's the plan to reduce those emissions. That is a huge amount of emissions. China's emissions right now globally are about 30% of overall emissions around the world. I think ours are 14, 13% from the U.S. side. So we need to look near term, but you're also right to look long term in terms of where we need to be.
Well, reducing that in China would be a good thing. I understand that, but we got to be sure that it is a true reduction when you take into all the methane side effects.
The methane emissions throughout the life cycle and also long term as well, when we need to be in a much more carbon constrained, much more methane emission constrained in a decade, 2 decades, and getting to net zero mid-century.
Final question. The timing, and you asked this. You're talking about months here, not years, on this analysis?
We're going to do it as quickly as we possibly can, months, not years. That's right.
Thank you. Thank
The
you.
only thing I would say on this, if we were talking about considering a pause, this is a great, great panel for this. You have an executive order doing a pause. That's the difference. That's the difference I have with my administration, our administration, the country's administration. You've done an executive order. You put, basically, they put the cart before the horse. You leaped, you really leaped before you looked. That's all we're saying.
I think it's just the opposite, Mr. Chairman. They're doing their job. Their job is to see that these projects are in the public interest.
I
There's no
agree
way to
with you
do
on
that without the
But you
data.
can't do the pause first, though. They did
Why
an
not?
executive order on pause.
So they're supposed to continue
They
approving
basically do the
projects?
pause, justify what you're
Just
doing. We just
continue
have,
approving projects when you find out 5 years from now it was a disaster. I don't think that's a very good policy.
they're estimating.
We're
that,
talking
okay,
6 months here.
You're
And
paying
these are
in New
projects
England.
that won't be built for
Look at
8
the prices
years.
you're paying in New England right now. Why? Why are you
Shortage
paying
of
higher
gas
prices?
pipeline
Okay,
capacity.
okay. That's what I'm saying. So in our own country, we have this type of diversity and division. That's the problem that we're running into. I'm just saying that the pause was ill-advised from a political standpoint of sending out to the world right now that we might not be in the market. That's all. You might be justified at what you're saying. Is it 26? Is it 48? Where is it? I don't know. I'm willing to find out. But you don't draw the brakes on everything and send scare tactics around the world
But
until we know for sure.
Shouldn't we find out before we make those commitments that are then irrevocable?
But they already do the reviews. Mr. Turk said that about every 5 years you do reviews. But as you do the reviews, the work continues. But you're still doing reviews. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to halt everything that is in the pipeline. I think that's
But
where this
nothing,
discussion is.
we're not, everything that's in the pipeline, quote unquote, that's been approved or under construction is grandfathered. This doesn't affect it.
That's
We're
right.
talking about projects that are 5 to 8 years in the future.
Yeah, they're never, the bottom line, we're going to get to the second panel, and I just want to thank you.
This is a real debate in the U.S. Senate. I like it.
I like it too. We don't do much of this. You can see why we're excited. We're excited. But I do. Ms. Turk, thank you so much. You've always been so kind with your time and being as direct as you always have been. I appreciate it and your knowledge you have. We have a little difference of opinion right now. We have a little, that's what this is all about. That's democracy. This committee can work through it. We'll find the answer. And all we're asking for is consider removing the pause until we do the facts. Come back and ask for your pause and show the facts of why you need it and what the number would be. We're not there. We don't have that information. I don't want to scare the bejesus out of our friends. That's all. So with that being said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Just
Go ahead.
very quickly, I asked for one opportunity, just for clarification on the record. You have stated, but I want to hear it clarified, that the Alaska LNG project is not impacted by this decision. Is that correct?
That has already been authorized. That is part of the 48 BCF per day. That is not impacted by this pause. And I think what Senator King was saying is exactly right. And I think this is why our allies have reacted. The part about Alaska or the part about Senator King?
But if I can just add further clarification to that, what if an export project to a non-FTA country that has been issued a DOE export license but is not yet constructed and is in the need of a license extension of the existing DOE export date authorization? Are those extensions impacted by the pause?
So let me be very clear, and we've
Okay.
been answering this question for folks who've been asking this question
Okay,
because
I
this
just
is.
need it, I'm curious about our specific
She wants
project.
you on
Tina.
records, what she said.
So just to be clear, this is stuff that's been authorized, but sometimes 7 years is not quite enough. That's how long the authorization's for, if anyone needs an extension. To be clear, this pause does not impact that process.
Extension, okay,
So
great.
we came out last year in April of last year. You can get an extension beyond 7 years if you meet two criteria. One, you have physically commenced construction, and then secondly, and I quote, extenuating circumstances outside of the control of the applicant.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you also for the efforts that you have made with regards to Cook Inlet natural gas. I know you have talked to folks up there about our looming natural gas supply challenges, but it might be good to sit down with the folks at DOI because they have done the review. If the concern is domestic prices, maybe you need to look at the policies that are being enacted by the Interior Department because they've done the analysis within their memo. So,
Mr. Turk, very
thank
much.
you.
We appreciate it. Now we're going to switch into our second panel. Second panel, if they please come forward. That's why I got Please come back. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
That was good.
Go ahead. Once again, I get the gavel.
Grab
right?
the gavel, do whatever you want to do.
Thanks.
Okay, well, first of all, now we have Dr. Charlie Riedel, Executive Director of the Center of LNG, and we have Dr. James Watson, Secretary General of Eurogas. And we're going to begin with your remarks, and Dr. Watson, we'll go start with you, and then we'll go right over to Dr. Riedel.
Well, first of all, I have to say thank you very much for inviting me here today. We really appreciate it to allow the European industry to have its views heard, and of course, in this great hall of democracy. So it does mean a lot, and also to me personally, as a young guy from Wales, getting the chance to be here, it's a great pleasure and a great honor. And obviously, my members are not sending me here for fun, to enjoy Washington, D.C. We're very busy. We have a lot of things to do. So I think that even by being here, it's very clear that our industry feels quite concerned about the developments on this side of the Atlantic. We must say that since the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, the situation in Europe has been very, very difficult.
Fossil gas CEOs have no place in this hearing room. Industry is trying to silence youth voices and frontline communities. And
We appreciate having you all, but this is not going to interrupt us. So thank you so much.
Millions of people you're sacrificing to climate disasters for the campaign cash.
I would also add we're very happy to talk to all NGOs.
Yeah, we'll
we have
talk
no
to them.
problem
Yeah,
with that.
we want them to be
We
heard.
are open to dialogue as Eurogas. We engage with NGOs.
We
work
appreciate
with
very
Greens.
much you all coming here. Thank you.
We work very, very happily with anybody who wants to have a serious dialogue on the issues we face.
The tide is rising, and so are we. The tide is rising.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Appreciate you being here. Continue, Mr. Watson.
Yeah, okay. And so I think that we have been in a very difficult situation since the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the war. Of course, the last 2 years has seen a tremendous amount of focus on the energy that we use. And we have to start by saying we are grateful to the United States for stepping up and indeed committing to send us 50 billion cubic meters of additional US LNG every year. I think that is a big commitment. Of course, it hasn't been met yet, Mr. Chairman, senators. We are, at the moment, looking at, in fact, a situation where we have only seen a 40 billion cubic meter increase last year. So we did find it very strange to be looking at a new situation coming out of Washington where there was going to be a pause on the LNG permitting situation. We feel that, indeed, the US and the EU and the UK need to stand together when we're looking at Ukraine and the situation that we face there. And by not being able, perhaps, to honor the commitments that have been made in the United States towards its allies, you are going to indeed force us to continue to do business with Russia. I have to say that I had a lot of sympathy for Mr. Turk because I think he'd been asked to explain the unexplainable, which is not easy to do. From my point of view, he failed to mention one very important statistic, and that is that Europe is still taking 50 billion cubic meters a year of Russian gas, and the LNG imports from Russia are increasing. Even though we have a stated aim to reduce Russian gas supply to zero by 2027. We feel very strongly that the United States should support us in this activity. We see it as a like-minded nation. We stand together, and we understand that we have to work together also to achieve our climate objectives, which we take very seriously. This whole situation has created a lot of fuss in the sense of we don't know what the situation is. Is the United States going to honor its commitments? Is the outcome of the review going to be not just a pause, but a total stop? Where then shall we source our gas? In this regard, I think that when we heard all of the statistics that were put together, I think the most important thing is what is said in the law. And the law in Europe has been very clear, and it's just been passed. There is no end or prohibition to the use of natural gas until 2049. Long-term contracts will be permitted, and after that point, they will still be permitted as long as they are abated. This is yet to be defined what abated means, but this means that for at least 25 years, we are expecting to be using natural gas. And that was something else that I think was also missing from the testimony. I think it is very important that we do look at this pause and think, why has this pause been taken now? I would also make a procedural point. In Europe, we often review our guidelines and our regulations, but at the same time, we keep implementing the ones that are currently running. Why do we have a pause? Why do you not just create new regulations or guidelines and then implement them once they are ready and replace the old? For what purpose could a pause serve? This is not clear to us. And so I must say, with my last 20 seconds that I have, it is important that we remain stable in our relationship. We do not need unnecessary surprises. This is a serious issue for us. We do consider it to be one of such a significant importance that I have been sent from Brussels to bring our message today to ask for your continued help. Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Mr. Riedel. Is it Riddle? I'm sorry, Riddle.
Riedel. No, you're good.
Riedel.
Thank you.
Ma'am.
Good morning, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and distinguished members of this committee. I'm honored to testify before all of you today. My name is Charlie Riedel, and I serve as the Executive Director at the Center for LNG. Our organization is committed to advancing public policies that promote the use and export of liquefied natural gas, and we represent the full LNG value chain, giving us a unique and comprehensive view of the ways in which LNG, as a sustainable, abundant, and versatile energy resource, can be leveraged globally. The United States, which is home to a vast natural gas reserve, is now the leader in global LNG exports. The role, however, extends beyond mere commodity trading, as James has mentioned. U.S. LNG is a linchpin to a global effort to reduce emissions, bolster economic growth, and enhance energy security, at home and for our allies in Europe and Asia. With the Biden administration's hold on LNG export application reviews, I'm here to emphasize the value of U.S. LNG and explain why the administration's pause is not only unfortunate but also short-sighted. When I last addressed this committee in 2019, there were 3 operational export facilities. As I speak today, there are 7. Domestic production of natural gas has also increased by 7% since that time. But that's only part of the story. Since the shale revolution began nearly 20 years ago, production has more than doubled, according to EIA, which we heard Secretary Turk discuss today. Over that same time period, since 2005, prices have fallen by 71% for domestic natural gas. And the resource of natural gas in the U.S. has reached an all-time high, according to the U.S. Potential Gas Committee. Amazingly, those resources have grown even as production in the U.S. has doubled, and consumers have reaped the economic benefits as a result. Our domestic supplies of affordable natural gas has created a manufacturing renaissance here in the U.S. Taking just the last 10 years, from 2018 and looking forward to 2027, U.S. natural gas has spurred over 78 major industrial projects in the United States, representing $128 billion in capital investment here in the United States. Our industry is committed to enhancing energy security while promoting sustainable environmental practices. LNG is a critical element in the shift towards a lower carbon energy future, and we emit 50% less CO2 than coal. LNG's role is an essential piece of the global effort to combat climate change, and this role has only increased over the last decade, bolstered by technological innovations such as methane emission monitoring and carbon capture. The expansion of LNG exports has brought and continues to bring about significant economic impacts here domestically, creating over 450,000 jobs and adding nearly $73 billion to the U.S. economy by 2040. LNG exports are also projected to reduce the U.S. U.S. trade deficit by 3% by the end of the decade. Transitioning to natural gas here in the U.S. has led to a 35% reduction in CO2 emissions from the U.S. power sector, and internationally, U.S. LNG exports offer a similar pathway for other countries to also lower their emissions. LNG pairs well with renewable energy sources, which further highlights the indispensable role that natural gas will continue to play in facilitating our sustainable energy future. The strategic importance of LNG exports in the realm of energy security and geopolitics cannot be overstated. The abrupt curtailment of Russian gas, as James mentioned, in Europe amid the invasion into Ukraine, highlighted the crucial role of U.S. LNG in maintaining global energy stability. The administration's commitment to replacing Russian gas with U.S. LNG, made in collaboration with the European Commission, is admirable, and it underscores the strategic value of these exports. But the pause on the export applications contradicts that commitment. It risks undermining our diplomatic relations with these countries, and also at a moment when energy security is so critically important. Regulatory certainty is essential for the continued investment and development of the LNG sector. Building LNG export terminals can take up to 10 years and upwards of $20 billion per project. So projects of this magnitude require extremely careful planning and investing, and any fluctuations in that policy or the regulatory frameworks will slow innovation and deter investments, which can potentially destabilize the United States leadership in the global energy market. Before exports began in 2016, the effects of U.S. LNG exports at home and abroad were theoretical, and they deserve thoughtful analysis as part of the Department of Energy's public interest review. Today, after 8 years of U.S. LNG export, the benefits are no longer theoretical. The facts are clear. U.S. LNG has been determined to be in the public interest. The decision to pause LNG export approvals could have far-reaching consequences, potentially jeopardizing international relationships, economic stability, and progress towards our environmental objectives. I appreciate the time and opportunity to testify today and look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We'll start our questions right now. I'll start with Dr. Watson. We all know that American LNG developers need to sign long-term contracts. I've been to Europe. I've been sitting with DITA and working with people on that in order to finance these new export facilities that Mr. Rattle so aptly gave you. The cost is quite enormous. At some points in the past, it's been difficult for American exporters to secure long-term contracts in Europe due to European companies and officials questioning whether Europe will need American LNG in the long run. And with everything that's evolved in the last 3 years, we know that that's changed. So in some cases, this meant countries that do not share our values, like China, have subscribed to American LNG capacity instead of our allies in Europe, where we'd rather make sure that we have this relationship. So how did the Russian invasion of Ukraine shift your members' views about signing long-term export agreements for American LNG? And what impact does this have on the administration's pause have on the future of your long-term agreements or contracts that might be needed or are in the works? I would like to know that.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question, Chairman. I think that indeed what we've seen since the war in Ukraine began is an increase in interest in doing business with the United States. When we looked at the numbers of long-term contracts that have been signed, indeed, a lot of those companies are now European. We would want to see more, but everything depends on having a stable relationship. Of course, there have been unfortunate situations where one company in particular, Venture Global, has not honored its long-term contracts. That is an issue for us. We would like to see the administration also address that. But to be more general, I think that there is a strong concern about the pause because of what I've said. In essence, we still take a lot of Russian LNG and pipe gas. We would like to have the ability.
You all have long-term contracts with Russia?
Yes, there are long-term contracts that are in place. Those
did the war abdicate that? I mean,
exactly. I was going to say those are not being honored. Those are not being honored by the Russians. They are not being supplied. That's very clear.
Mr. if I may, and we'll come back.
Yeah.
Mr. Riddle, some in your industry have argued that DOE should be completely removed from the LNG review process because there should be no limit to how much LNG we're allowed to be exported. If permits were not an issue, where do you assess the exports would cap out at, if any? Where do you look at that as far as when you find the ratio of what you think should be here and there and how we serve both?
It's a good question. I think getting to the point of what I was talking about in my opening remarks around supply, I think the point being the U.S. market has demonstrated the ability to absorb the increase that we've seen, right? The comment earlier that we're at 14% of current production value here in the U.S. That number, production will rise to match that. The market will determine exactly just how much more volume is brought on. When we start trying to pick winners and losers in projects, I think we're automatically losing.
How about the 22 that are still in the queue?
Yeah, those 22 that are in the queue, some of those might actually end up getting built, some might not, right? I mean, the market conditions are really
market would determine that. Long-term contracts coming from.
That's right.
Yes, sir. Dr. Watson, and your reply.
Yeah, just to say on that, because in fact that's true, and I do have figures, in fact, right here, where we looked at the assessment of the projects that are in the pipe, but still we see, in fact, that if you look at the amount of gas that's going to be coming from those, we're still talking around about 20 to 24 billion cubic meters a year, which is not 50 billion cubic meters.
Let me, and Mr. Otto, I would say, and to my dear friend, Senator King, a lot of this, the gas that we've been basically tapped into at 37 trillion cubic feet and growing has come a lot from the oil production. And if the oil production is needed to try to keep the world markets from getting in flux and the prices, we saw what happened. With that production, there's an awful lot of gas that comes off of that production. What happens to that gas if we don't? Does it stop the production of oil? Does it basically, is that really what this, some of our adversaries who don't want us to produce the gas. So if we quit producing the oil, then it would have a negative effect on us. Where does that gas go? Has it been flared in the past?
Yes.
And now we're capturing it and sending it for a commodity?
Yes. Yes, on both fronts. If we're not able to, with the associated gas that's coming out of the major oil plays, if we're not able to capture that gas through the technology that we've
It's a
developed.
detriment to the environment.
Right.
I don't know what it was before. We're capturing it now. So that's why
Right.
we say we produce it cleaner than anywhere else in the world. And the appetite that you all have, can you replace all, if you had a constant supply from us, knowing that we were reliable and long-term, can you replace all of your Russian dependency?
That would certainly be the objective, sir. I think that this is really how we would like to see it. We do see the great importance of the relationship with the United States. We are doing more long-term contracts. That is something that is growing. Of course, it's not going to be just like that overnight.
Sure.
Like you rightly pointed out, we do indeed still have some with Russia. We've got our fingers burnt. So it always takes a bit of time to get into new long-term contracts. That's why this pause is relatively damaging, because it's about how you do business with a new partner on long-term contract fronts. So we would, of course, preferred to have had that stable regime. And I think that this is one of the things that a CEO of one of my members has said. It reduces the confidence that the EU industry has in the partnership that we're trying to build
Well, the
with
case
the US.
may have been made here. Basically, we do not want to start exporting to China to supply their energy needs. We want to make sure we have all of our allies in the Western world and all those who have our same values. That's our desire to make that happen, and we have the ability to do that. Senator Barrasso, your questioning.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Watson, earlier this week, Jeffrey Pyatt, a U.S. State Department official, responded to widespread alarm over the president's decision to stop approving new liquefied natural gas exports. He said there's no reason for concerns with the position of the administration. Are you concerned about the president's decision to stop permitting new LNG?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ranking Senator Barrasso. I indeed have to say that that is a concern for us, and that is why, indeed, I am here today to make that testimony. We do see this as some kind of destabilization of the situation, and that is very difficult for us to understand and to take. And I think that we would like to have a better understanding of why a pause has been declared in the middle of winter, which is in Europe the peak gas season, and also to understand how long this will take, what is the likely outcome? Is there an outcome at one point that says that actually no more gas will be coming from the United States? From our point of view, it's very unclear. We are in a situation where we are very close to the front line of the war. We have 4 million Ukrainian refugees housed in Europe at the moment. We are indeed suffering, certainly on the economic front. Demand destruction has been mentioned by your colleague, the Honourable Chairman. These are all realities that we are facing. And we see the United States as a good opportunity for us to work together to get us through those difficult times.
Do you believe that most officials in Europe oppose what the president has done here in terms of the decision to stop approvals of LNG exports?
I can only tell you this. There is no European government that has welcomed this decision. The European Commission, despite what Mr. Turk said, did not welcome this decision. The European Parliament has not welcomed this decision, nor has the European Council. The United Kingdom has not welcomed this decision. No country in Europe has welcomed this decision. Maybe some have made noises, which I think are necessary, and Mr. Turk alluded to it, to say we shouldn't see this as a crisis. That's correct. We don't want to create some kind of new panic in our markets and send our prices haywire. In reality, we have to be a bit stoic.
Stoic. You don't hear that word around here in the United States Senate very often. Mr. Riedel, the Biden administration claims its decision to stop permitting new LNG exports is going to have minimal and only short-term impacts. Would you explain how this decision is actually going to hurt companies' ability to obtain financing for new and existing facilities?
Sure. Well, I think you just heard Dr. Watson very clearly elaborate the concern from the other side, but I think if we talk about the project investment here, I mentioned the $20 billion of projects, right? No one's going to finance a $20 billion project without firm commitments on the long-term contracts that we've been discussing this morning. A project relies on a non-free trade authorization as part of the idea that they have all of the necessary permits from the United States to begin export. No bank is going to lend a $20 billion loan to a project developer on the idea that they might end up getting their permit at some point down the road. So when we talk about the pause and what that could potentially bring about, it's a slowing of the ability to actually meet the needs from our buyers around the world. And what would ultimately happen is those projects that we're going to make $20 to $25 billion investments just simply won't be built, and we won't be able to satisfy international demand from the market.
So talking about the timeline and all the impact there, so even before the President's recent announcement, what we've seen from the Department of Energy has been sort of slow walking the approvals of LNG exports. Under this President, the average time to process these applications jumped from about 2 months to over a year. How would you discuss how Biden's recent decisions has made actually the bad situation worse?
Look, I think the idea that we're dealing with the unpredictability of a project waiting for a permit to now an indefinite pause. We didn't hear a timeline from the Deputy Secretary today on how quickly they could complete the study. I think our question is similar to the one that my panelist shares, which is, why pause? We have looked at these studies numerous times. We've done these studies multiple times in the past. This will be the fourth time that we've looked at the macroeconomic impacts and the third time that we've looked at the life cycle analysis. In every previous instance, when we've completed these studies, we've continued to keep working on processing permits.
And in terms of long-term contracts and the necessity for certainty, you're just not going to have it. Dr. Watson, a substantial amount of LNG imported to Europe travels through shipping lanes of the Middle East. Recent events have demonstrated Iran and its proxies are threatening these supplies. Would Europe benefit from a greater supply of U.S. LNG that doesn't have to travel through and around active conflict zones?
Well, obviously, I think if you're traveling across the Atlantic, this is a very safe part of the world. So going from the United States to the European Union and the UK, we wouldn't see any particular dangers with that. On the other hand, if we are looking at what is going on in the Gulf and the Red Sea area, of course, there is a lot of danger to shipping. Though I have to say I'm not aware of any Qatari-based ships that have been attacked. We may make some sort of supposition of why that is, but I don't think that I should really probably go into that in too much detail. It's speculating, but they haven't been attacked as far as I'm aware.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Senator King.
Well, first, my friend, the Vice Chair, has migrated from pause to stop. Nobody's talking about stopping. We're talking about taking a period of time in order to do the necessary research to have the information. So I think it's important that the language match the reality. Dr. Watson, welcome. I don't know if you're aware, but Americans attribute roughly 20 points of IQ to anyone with a British accent. So we're delighted to have you raising the level here today. I appreciate that. Mr. Riddell, you testified that where we are now is in the public interest, 14% of production. My question is, as it's already committed to 28% and then to 42%, that's already in the pipeline for construction. That's not affected by this pause. Do you have the same level of confidence? It's hard for me to believe that if you have a finite resource and you essentially divert half of it, that's not going to affect the price of what's left. And you've testified that there was an increase, but these estimates of 42% going to 54% are based upon also projections of increasing the level of production. How can you assure the American consumers that they won't face an Australia situation where the price has gone up 5 times?
Sure. So I think that's an important question that we discussed this morning. So I think the idea, right, is the assumption that we're going to remain flat in our production is just inaccurate, right? So I think that the idea...
But I don't think these projections assume that. I think they do assume growth.
In production, correct.
In production.
They assume...
54% of assumed growth of production.
Correct. When we look at the resource base of natural gas here in the U.S., the EIA, when they model these forecasts looking forward, they do take into account in looking at the increase in production caused by the increase in demand for natural gas, whether that's in the demand from the industrial sector, electric sector, or LNG export sector. When you look at those demand signals from the market, production then rises to meet that. EIA, when they're forecasting out to 2050, are not assuming that we're only going to continue producing just 100 BCF a day of gas. They're assuming that we're going to continue to increase the production of natural gas.
And I agree with that, but what I'm saying is using that increased production base, the projection is that the projects that are already approved and or in construction will go to about 45% of the increased production. Can you assure me that that's not going to affect the gas prices for manufacturers and businesses and consumers in the U.S.? This is what I'm worried about.
Sure, I understand. So I think that the confusion there maybe is the idea that it's actually going to be 45%. That's not what they're suggesting.
Well, that's what's in the pipeline. I mean, that's
That's what's in the pipeline,
capacity that's been authorized by either in construction or authorized by the,
Correct, but that
the
40,
Energy
that 45% number that you're suggesting assumes that we're remaining flat at
no, it
production.
doesn't. That's what you just said. The assumptions assume a growth of production. And these numbers, 42%, is of a growing production base. It's not assuming, I don't believe it assumes a flat production.
I apologize if I miscommunicated that. That's not assuming that we're going to, that 42% number would be if we remain flat at production is what I'm suggesting.
Okay, we'll have to check this. I disagree with you. I don't think that's what the,
Yeah, we can gladly follow up with that information.
I'd be happy to. The other piece is, last year, the Australians had to put a cap on domestic natural gas prices. Nobody wants to go there, but when their prices have increased 5 times, and all accounts are based upon the enormous explosion of that's a wrong term to use in this context, the growth of natural gas exports. Again,
Sure.
I just want to ask these questions and get the answers, and it seems to me this pause is an opportunity to do those kinds of studies, and it's not the end of the world because it doesn't affect any projects that are already in the pipeline for the next 4 or 5 years. We're talking about projects 8 or 9 years, 10 years from now.
So 2 points there. One, it does impact projects that are currently in the queue. There are 2 projects that are immediately impacted by this pause.
How?
Because they're waiting for their permit and they're going to need an extension.
Oh, they're in the, well, but the testimony of the prior witness was this was not the pause would not affect an extension of an existing permit.
Understood. I'm happy to follow up and explain further. I know that we're close on time here. So the other piece, and getting to the Australia side of this, gas this morning in the United States is trading at $1.98 an M. So when we start talking about putting caps on sort of where we're at relative and to the studies that
And
have
that's
looked at
about
this
where
in
it
the
was in
past.
Australia in 2005,
Right, and-
before they started their export boom. There's another term I shouldn't have used. And now the prices have gone up by 5 times. I'm not contesting that right now it's all working.
Right.
I'm saying it's okay at 14%. How will it be at 28%, which is what's under construction, and how will it be at 42 or 50%? That's all the question here.
Understood. And like I said, we're happy to follow up to explain why that 28% number that you're suggesting doesn't actually account for the production that we're talking about from a gas perspective.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Mikowski.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to Senator Daines, who has another commitment, and I'm enjoying this hearing so much I don't want to leave.
Senator Daines.
Senator Mikowski, thank you for that. And Chair Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, thank you as well. Look, I didn't think I'd live to see the day where we'd have an administration work to pause and go backwards as relates to liquid natural gas. The Biden administration's recent pause on LNG exports approval is an affront to the American people. It's going to lead to fewer jobs, less security, and bolsters our adversaries. Unfortunately, this action, I think, only demonstrates how far out of touch this administration is from reality. Once again, the Biden administration is bending to the wills of an extreme green agenda and turning this back on hardworking Americans. Less than a year ago, the Department of Energy rightfully denied Extreme Climate Group's petition to change the department's process for approving LNG export terminals. Yet out of the blue, President Biden just announced that he's pausing all applications and now reviewing the process. What changed between last year and now? Nothing. The only thing that has changed is this administration has caved to the woke green agenda to appease activists at the expense of working families. Simply look at the White House website. Go look at it. They're promoting quotes like #StopLNG and, quote, "This is the most significant action taken by the president to curb fossil fuel expansion," end quote. It is beyond a doubt that U.S. exports of LNG are good for the economy, good for jobs, good for national security, and good for our allies. This pause will do nothing but hurt Americans. It will help Russia. It will help Iran. It will help other adversaries. Deputy Secretary, Mr. Riedel and Dr. Watson, I've got questions for you. The federal law is very clear. The government shall issue an approval for LNG exports, and I'm quoting, unless it finds that the proposed exportation will not be consistent with the public interest, end quote. That's what it says. It's very clear that growing jobs, bolstering the economy, reducing emissions, I said again, reducing emissions and helping our allies are all in the public interest. So I have a couple of simple questions to drill down on this fact. A recent analysis showed that continued expansion of LNG exports to our European allies will lead to an increase of over 400,000 jobs through 2030. Do you agree there'll be more jobs for American families, and that's in the public interest?
Simply yes.
Dr. Watson?
I would say that's probably correct. From our point of view, of course, it's an American question, so I would leave it to Charlie to answer.
He sounds better when answering it.
He does. Well, it's 20 points IQ improvement when you answer. You know that, according to Senator King. Second question regarding the economy. Increased development of natural gas in the United States provides revenue for local, state, and federal governments and improves energy security. Do you agree that increased revenue for local communities to support education, support infrastructure, and community services is in the public interest?
Yes.
Really? Dr. Watson?
Again, it's for Charlie, but I would say yes.
All right. Next, regarding supporting allies. Exports of U.S. LNG to Europe has led to the reduction of European imports from Russia. If the United States does not continue to meet the global demand, then our allies will be forced to turn to Russia. Here's the question. Do you agree that supporting our allies, Dr. Watson, this is one that you'll be able to answer here. Do you agree that supporting our allies and reducing Russia's influence is in the public interest?
Without question.
Yes, definitely.
Numerous studies have shown that the increase of LNG exports has contributed to the reduction of global emissions. Do you agree that reducing emissions is in the public interest?
Absolutely.
Dr. Watson. Well, thanks for giving clarity here to something the Biden administration seems to lack clarity on. It's very clear to see that continuing to grow LNG exports will bolster jobs, support our allies, and contribute to energy security. I urge the Department of Energy to reverse course immediately and return to reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And gentlemen, thank you for being here before the committee. Thank you for making the trip across and for the representation that you have. I want to start with you, Dr. Watson, if I may. The administration's press release for this LNG pause states that this policy, quote, will not impact our ability to continue supplying LNG to our allies in the near term, and that unprovoked acts of aggression cannot threaten the EU's supply. Do you agree with the administration's assessment, what they have stated in their own press release? Would you report that EU's supply and storage capacities are sufficient, and that the administration's policy poses no risk to create energy vulnerability within the EU?
I think the important caveat was in the short term, and I think that we would probably agree with that, but it's not just about the short term. The International Energy Agency was quoted a lot this morning, and they are forecasting a supply gap within 2 to 3 years. This means that Europe will face a future problem if there is not the capacity there to supply our needs, or, as your colleague, Senator, previously said, we will simply have to continue beyond that 2027 deadline taking Russian gas. There isn't really much choice for us.
Well, I appreciate that you have accentuated that, because this is part of the challenge that we're dealing with here. And you heard from Undersecretary Turk, we don't know how long this pause will continue. You've used some key phrases in your comments that Mr. Turk was put in front of us to explain the unexplainable, but you also spoke to the risk that the Biden administration has taken with this pause. It impacts the way investors are looking at the future. It impacts diplomatic relationships. It impacts our credibility, really. Our credibility is on the line here. Will the United States honor its commitments? Right now, we are trying to figure out how we're going to honor our commitment to Ukraine, to Israel, to Taiwan. And I'll just say it here, we're in a little bit of a mess right now in sending a clear and concise message that the United States is going to be there for our friends and our allies, whether it's at times of security crisis, national security crisis, or when resources are important to that, not only that trade relationship, but also to that diplomatic relationship and to the stability. You said that we don't need unnecessary surprises. Was this an unnecessary surprise?
Indeed, Senator, I think this is what I described it as. And I think when we were first alerted to the situation as this was being developed, the position, of the administration, we did write to the White House and to the DOE because we wanted to express our alarm at the situation, because it isn't clear to us, at least, what will happen in this review during this pause. Because it doesn't seem there's a particular agreed outcome. Does it mean that there will be LNG available for us after it, or not? I don't think that Mr. Turk could answer that question either, because he has to look at all the data and look at many different things, which I think, of course, is concerning. And I think I would use the word that was used, indeed, by one of my members here, and he said that it would erode confidence in doing business with the United States. And I think that's we should all be concerned, not just us.
We are very concerned. Let me turn to you, Mr. Riedel. We don't know how long this pause is going to continue. We know that this has created certain uncertainty. But if this pause turns out to be more than just a short pause, I tried to pin Undersecretary Turk down to see if he would commit to the comments made by Mr. Crabtree, that it was just going to be several months. He couldn't commit to that. So I don't think we've learned anything more from this hearing into the duration. But if it turns out to be more of a long pause and then a moratoria, how do you think that this affects the energy security of some of our allies in the medium and the long term here? Because we're trying to signal that we're going to be there, but a pause doesn't give you that. And the longer a pause draws out, the more decisions are going to have to be made into the future, because our future here is not certain. Can you share with me what concerns you have about a lengthy pause and potentially the moratoria? I mean, the moratoria is pretty tough. But are we already starting to see impacts from this announced policy just in the few weeks that it's been out there?
So the short answer is yes, we've already seen impacts. The additional sort of points that I'd like to make to that, one is when we start to think about what this message sends, you've heard sort of from my colleague here what he's suggesting on the impact on the European market, but it's not just the European market that we're talking about. There's Asian markets that we already are honoring long-term contract commitments that have signed up for additional long-term contract commitments that they're calling into question already. Why this pause? So similar to the Europeans, the Asian market buyers are asking the exact same questions. The unknown of how long this pause takes while they conduct this study is enormously problematic in trying to answer not only to the market, but to the investors who are lined up to make large sum investments in these projects. So it not only hurts there, but then I want to sort of touch on the geopolitical ramifications as well, right? When we start talking about the idea that others who were thinking about long-term contracts, buying from the United States, from LNG producers, turning to Russia, Iran, Qatar, those countries are not aligned with the same sort of thought process that we share from a value standpoint. And it plays right into sort of the hands of funding the geopolitical unrest that's already happening around the world to the point that you're making. The mess that we are in is a real one. And so if we start taking U.S. energy off of the water and LNG off of the water and looking at a longer-term pause, it's to the detriment not only from a security standpoint, but also from our allies and looking for that energy from the United States.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cassidy. Turn your speaker on, sir.
The committees. Mr. Riedel, this is like a war on the American worker. It's really amazing. This policy is a war on the American worker. I think the fourth largest project in the world right now is in South Louisiana, building an LNG export plant. And the number of jobs, good-paying jobs for people who otherwise would not have that economic opportunity is incredible. So can you comment a little bit, and keep your answer tight, please, on the economic impact if we create uncertainty? No, if the administration kowtowing to their climate lobby for electoral politics creates the uncertainty associated with this, the impact that'll have on working Americans' jobs, not just in Louisiana, but across the country?
Sure. So average construction price of a facility is $15 to $20 billion, 6 to 8.
That's billion with a B.
Correct. 6,000 to 8,000 employees at a job site for upwards of 10 years building these facilities. So those facilities that don't get built, that's 6,000 to 8,000 jobs that would ultimately not come to fruition. Not only that, when you look at taking that LNG off the market, there's production numbers in upstream markets like Arkansas, Ohio, Pennsylvania, other places where production drops as a result of the demand signal from the market going down when LNG facilities don't get built.
So there's the construction jobs, but there's also the permanent jobs. This is a war on those workers. Now let me ask, because this supposedly is being done kind of because of climate policy, but I just want to put something up there real quickly. The greenhouse gas emissions life cycle associated with U.S. LNG and with Russian gas. Clearly, we are much cleaner. Now, Mr. Watson, they said you're more intelligent because you have a British accent, but I will note that you are named after an American biologist. So that said. But is market demand going to go away because the climate lobby decides that the administration should create uncertainty in the LNG export? Put differently, will England and Germany still need natural gas?
Well, I think it's very clear that at least for the short to mid-term, we are going to be using lots of natural gas.
And so if the United States doesn't provide it, the Qataris, the Iranians, and the Russians will probably provide it.
We have to get it from somewhere.
You have to get it from somewhere. And so they will use their environmental standards to supply Germany, and instead of having fewer emissions, we'll have more emissions because of this policy.
I am very familiar with the study you're referring to by the Rocky Mountain Institute, and that is exactly what we also believe in Eurogas.
So this electoral politics is actually a war on the climate. Let me ask, Mr. Riedel, if magically China replaced 1/3 of the coal they're burning with U.S. natural gas, can you kind of give us a sense of like the impact that would have upon global emissions?
I mean, I think when we talk about U.S. combustion of natural gas relative to coal, it's a reduction of anywhere from 50 to 60%. When you think about that sort of number.
So it would dramatically decrease Chinese emissions. By the way, I looked it up once. When China burns coal, the SOx and NOx blow over the Pacific Ocean and they land on our west coast. And I think 1/3 of the sulfur in the atmosphere in California actually originates in China. I hate to say it, this is kind of war on air quality in California. Not giving the Chinese the ability to convert from coal to natural gas is going to make somebody have an asthma attack somewhere in the Bay Area. This is a war on the health of our West Coast. Pretty amazing. So let me just finish up by this. I don't get a sense that there is a clear rationale. If the rationale is that we are going to decrease emissions by doing this, it doesn't seem like either of you think that's the case. It clearly is going to negatively impact workers in the United States. It is clearly going to negatively impact our allies. And by the way, Mr. Watson, you point out that it creates an uncertainty regarding future dealings with the United States. I don't know if the administration could have made more wrong decisions in one policy if they had actively sought to do so, unless they were actively seeking to do so. Thank you. I yield.
You want to go on if you can, if you have another question, since you missed the first one. You're on a roll there, brother. Let me just say to both of you, thank you for your expertise in coming here. There's an awful lot going on this morning. You see members coming and going all along, but I can tell you your comments and giving us a view of what's going on in the market is very, very helpful. We want to make sure that the American market is protected, but our allies are protected also. We want to make sure that we're displacing basically the Russian, or whether it's the Iranian or whether it's the Qatari, from dominating these markets, because the resources they receive from that, the money, is used for absolutely horrible things for our world. And that's what we're trying to look at. So the only thing, and I've said this very clearly, the administration was so wrong and basically stating a pause by an executive order. They could have said we're going to have hearings and listen to the concerns we have about maybe going into a pause if needed. That's where they basically jumped before they basically looked where they were jumping. And we're trying to get them to retract that. I think your help in showing how you can basically totally wean yourself off of Russian gas, which is our intention, to stop the flow of revenue going to them to be used against our allies in Ukraine and all over Europe. And hopefully we can take this message back and maybe change for the better, if you will. We'll put a real pause to the pause is what I think we should do. So with that being said, all comments from Melbourne will be taken into consideration, and this meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.